Welcome to the Lifestyle First podcast, discussing lifestyle medicine and making self-care as easy as 1, 2, 3. One question, 2 research reviews, and 3 actionable health tips, all centered around the Lifestyle First method, your blueprint for the 10 key routes of optimal health and happiness. And now your host, lifestyle medicine physician and coach, Dr. L.I.F.E.S.T.Y.L.E.
Hello and welcome back. I am so excited to bring to you Series 3. Now, I hope you're now settling into the flow of the podcast, all centered around the Lifestyle First method, where we discuss life's purpose, identity, food, exercise, sleep, time out, your connections, learning habits, and emotions. So this season, I would like you to join me and meet 10 other doctors who have a lifestyle focus in their consultations, who take a 360-degree view of health and who focus on the things you can do, we can all do in our daily lives to enhance our health. So let's get going. This is Series 3, Episode 1, and the theme in the Lifestyle First method we'll be exploring today is L, life's purpose. And the one question we're asking today is, what are the physical health benefits to having purpose? And the 2 pieces of information we'll be looking at to explore this are 2 journal articles looking at the association between life's purpose and mortality. And today, to discuss this, I have with me Dr. Sultana Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed, Sultana, well, she splits herself 3 ways. She's a GP in Manchester, a forensic psychiatry doctor, and also a mother to 2 young children. So welcome, Sultana, and over to you, I think. Why don't you maybe just start by explaining what purpose is and can we actually measure it?
Yes, excellent. Hi, thank you so much for having me. So I love talking about purpose, and what I thought we would start off with is a definition. So if you open up a dictionary and you look at the definition, it will say something like, purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or the reason for which something exists, which is technically a noun. But what's also interesting is that purpose can also be an action. So like she walked with purpose. And I thought if we just actually take that in for a moment, it beautifully illustrates how, a thought, which is a purpose, can also translate into an action, which is kind of what I'm going to be talking about. So holding a purpose in your mind can and should actually result in changing behaviors in your lifestyle. So you've got a purpose in your head and in your body as well, which I thought was actually quite good. And I didn't think about that until I actually was reading around for this podcast. I thought that was quite cool.
That's really interesting. Is it a noun? Is it a verb? No, it's both.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was quite cool. And then obviously it's a interesting topic. Historians, religious scholars, philosophers, and even scientists have been kind of studying it for generations, much before us. And you wouldn't think such an abstract concept lends itself to scientific study, but if you actually dig around, you'll see that scientists have actually been studying purpose for a long time. It's difficult to measure, but a lot of the studies that I've looked at, they kind of have a list of questions or standardized questionnaires, and they will give your purposeness a score. So the higher the score is, the more strong your sense of purpose is. And that is the premise on which they kind of do these studies, which is what we're working with right now. And the 2 scientific research papers that I looked at, they were basically looking at what are the physical health benefits of having purpose in your life. So what they did was they looked at how strong your purpose is, and then looked at various factors of physical health. So I'll chat a bit about those.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd be really interested actually, because we think of purpose as connected to your emotions and your feelings, but we don't actually always relate it to your physical health. So yeah, I'd be interested to know kind of what the discoveries are.
Yeah. So if you ever needed an actual reason, then these are very good reasons for you to actually have some purpose in your life. So the two papers that I looked at were very recent. One was published in 2015 and the other one was 2019. So the first paper was titled "A Purpose-Driven Life May Last Longer." And what the study found, they looked at 7,000 adults aged over the age of 50. The participants completed this questionnaire, and the study showed that those who had the highest scores were less likely to die during that study period. And more specifically, they were less likely to die from heart, circulatory, or blood conditions than people who scored lower on their purpose scores, which is fascinating. And then another study, which again, 2015, also found that, now this study was a bit more comprehensive. So it was a meta-analysis. It looked at 10 recent studies, which involved looking at the data from 136,000 patients. So, a very large number, and they looked at the studies for over 7 years, so pretty a long time. And again, that analysis showed that there was a lower risk of death for participants with a high sense of purpose in their life, and mortality was a fifth lower for participants who displayed a strong sense of purpose. It's important to point out that it didn't protect you from all physical health illnesses, so things like cancers or solid organ tumours, things like that. There was no difference in mortality there, but when it came to circulation and heart issues, there was a benefit to be had if you had a high sense of purpose. Which is great.
And it is still the number one. I know we're in the midst of COVID, but it still remains the number one. I don't like to use the word killer, but it is. In the UK is circulation and specifically heart disease, isn't it? So if there's a way of protecting yourself from that by actually developing that passion and purpose, then I think that's kind of pretty strong, actually.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily a difficult habit to develop, and really all it is a concept or something in your mind that can potentially increase your lifespan, which is great. One of the logical questions you might think about, well, how is that possible? Like, why would having a sense of purpose lead to a longer life? It doesn't make sense, but actually, if you think about it, it does. I mean, you might know this or feel this from a common sense point of view, but even if you look at the literature, what it shows is that people who have purpose, they're less likely to become stressed, basically. So they're not activating their sympathetic nervous system as much, which means that they won't be suffering from, the chronic effects of adrenaline or cortisol, which we know puts a strain on the heart. It puts the strain on your blood pressure, which would then lead on to these cardiovascular incidents that we're talking about. So people who have a really strong sense of purpose, it seems like they've got this really rock solid foundation, and it just seems to give them resilience so that they're able to not be affected as much by stress or negative effects. And they probably can view their life through, a lens which allows them to look at a bigger picture and kind of put all of those negative events into context. So it doesn't really bug them as much because everything has a bigger meaning or a deeper meaning, which clearly then overall leads to physical health benefits as well.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, isn't it? We've been talking about purpose. I mean, I wasn't there, but when Socrates was talking, that's what he was talking about, is living that impassioned, purposeful life. And now a gazillion years later, we're discovering that there's a physiological base to all of this, because kind of we like explanation, don't we? But if only we'd gone with the kind of philosophical theories and not sort out sort of the physiological reasons, we'd have been doing this for a long, long time. But I think now, there is so much more concrete information, call it evidence, call it science, about how this actually functionally affects the body, that it's not just somebody saying, hey, live a happy life. It's much more than that. Like you said, you can actually affect how long you live.
Yeah, which is crazy. And I think one of the things that people also struggle with now is that that's not necessarily something that's taught to us in schools or by the education system, to have a purpose or anything like that. So it doesn't really fit in with what people do now. And I know for myself, I probably just discovered it later on in life when you're kind of exploring different concepts and stuff. So yeah, it's an age-old concept that seems to have come back around time and time again, and and it's probably because it benefits us.
Yeah. And I talked about this in one of my previous episodes, but the notion of work and purpose in work. And I think it's a lot about, where are you spending a lot of your time? What are you wrapping around your life? And look, for a lot of us, that is around work, isn't it? And actually creating meaning and purpose in what you do, whether they're those mundane tasks of the day that no one wants to do on a Monday morning, or it's that impassioned stuff that you do find you're doing at work. I think it's kind of really important. But there's also a blend with the whole of life, isn't there? I don't think you can just segregate, right, I'll have purpose in this part of my life, but the rest of it I won't. It has to encompass everything you do. And it's really interesting is when you go through that journey of discovery, actually what you do find is that becomes your wraparound, doesn't it? Suddenly life starts being wrapped around that. Have you kind of experienced that yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I posted recently on something called alignment, which again is quite similar to this. And it's about how, when you're able to align your purpose and values to your work, your home life, and your everyday activities, then it just all flows beautifully and everything seems to make sense. Everything is in sync. And overall, I think people report feeling happier and a bit more fulfilled in themselves. So if we are able to kind of cultivate a sense of purpose in people, really get them thinking about it, there's lots of physical and psychological benefits to gain from it, definitely.
And I think you've unraveled something really important around sort of physical health, because actually that, that is how we function. That's how that thought becomes the action, is kind of in what we do, doesn't it? And I think it is really important to bring that out, actually, is that there is a physical benefit to this. It's not about just how you feel, which is so important in itself, but actually there's some other layer of protection that you're providing to yourself. So it's cardiovascular health. Do any other kind of physical areas that are specifically protected?
So it was mainly cardiovascular health that I read about, and the only other kind of explanations they gave was that stress was also associated with inflammation, therefore reducing stress reduces inflammation, possibly some autoimmune conditions, but mainly it was around cardiovascular health.
I think this is just asking for so much more research, isn't there? We're learning so much more about inflammation, gut health, immunity, stress hormones that are all connected to all of that. So definitely look forward to hopefully hearing more research in that area.
And now here is your Lifestyle First prescription, your 3 activating actions to take you from knowing to doing.
Sultana, do you have 3 health actions today?
I do. So these are mainly centered on trying to help people figure out what their purpose might be. So like you said, it would be great if our jobs and everyday actions was related to our purpose, but a lot of people find that, well, their job is their job. It's a necessity and it's not necessarily filled with purpose. So I've come up with 3 tips that you can maybe start off with to help get you thinking about your purpose. So the first one is my all-time favorite tip. It's my answer to a lot of things, and that's mainly because I feel like it's an underrated skill, and that is to keep a journal. And if you follow me, etc., you will know that time and time again I will come back to journaling. And I think it's because when your thoughts are wandering around in your head, they'll make sense in a point in time, and then you'll forget, and you might come to it later on. But if something's written in black and white, it's there for you to see. So I think journaling specifically for this, if what I've read people do is they give themselves a score every day of how happy they are that day, 10 being the most happy, 0 being the least happy, and they also record the type of activities they've done that day. And the point is that over time, you should be able to see what type of activities consistently make you more happy. And so the logic is that within those activities, you might find your purpose. And therefore, you should explore those things more, maybe plan those things more, do a little bit of those things in your everyday life. And when you're happy, hopefully that will kind of lead you to your purpose a bit more easier rather than doing activities blindly. And so journaling will help keep you keep a track of all of those things.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because I think it stems from, if you don't notice something, then how can you change it? And actually what journaling does is it gets you to notice. It just increases that awareness of yourself and gives you a bit of space to reflect, and then solidifies it when you put it in writing, and then you notice it more, you recognize it. Otherwise, as you say, so much happens in a day. What do we tend to focus on? Not the stuff that made us happy usually, unfortunately. So I think that's amazingly powerful. Great, thank you. Tip number 2.
And then number 2 is, so sometimes if what you're doing already, you can't see a sense of purpose in those activities, then I would encourage people to actively seek out new activities, different activities that they're not doing already. It might involve a Google search or going to a friend to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. Or if someone invites you somewhere random, taking that opportunity and saying yes, and like kind of seeing where it leads to. And I guess the logic behind that is to increase your exposure to all the different things life has to offer you, and then seeing what you take to, because you don't know what you don't know, and really putting yourself out there. I'm hoping that the universe will then answer back and say, well, why don't you actually go down this lane and then try this? And that's where some of the best stories are. People are like, oh, well, I was randomly doing this thing, which was completely out of character. And then, they met the love of their life, or they landed a dream job, etc. So I would definitely encourage people to have an open mind and try new and different things that they're not doing already.
So it takes just that tiny bit of stretch out of your comfort bubble, doesn't it? And this isn't about taking a big leap into the unknown, but actually just start with that tiny stretch. Start with something that you haven't done before. Try it out. Like, what can happen?
Well, if you don't like it, fine, move on to something else. And it's as easy as that. You don't have to commit to something you don't like, but just give it a go.
Like that, really like that. Okay, thank you. And number 3.
And then number 3 is, now I have also done this myself. And again, it's something that I do recommend quite a bit. And it's just because it was such an eye-opener for me. And that is coaching. So coaching seems to be quite popular and trendy right now. I know that a lot more people are talking about it, which I think is fantastic. And I guess, coaches themselves, they probably spend a lot of time reading about how to motivate people, or, kind of psychological and cognitive processes that I don't have time to read about every day. And so I think going to a professional and working with them to help you realize what your purpose is actually quite useful. So when I did coaching a few years ago, they just gave me the tools to actually, I didn't necessarily get a sense of purpose, but they gave me a set of tools that I can then use every day to help me identify, oh, well, I quite like this. No, I don't like that. That wasn't a great experience. Why did that happen? Etc. etc. And the great thing about coaching is you can tailor it to what you want to achieve as well. So if you have a specific help me find my focus, or let's work through so I can determine a purpose, and then they will do that with you, and it's skills you can carry on lifelong. So I would, if you can, I would definitely recommend coaching if you can.
No, I love that because I am a coach and I do coach. You didn't know that, did you? But actually, do you know what? It's a conversation style which lands the conversation back with you, because I truly believe that actually the answer already lies within you. You don't need me, right, the doctor, the fixer, to fix anything for you. Actually, you have it all. But what coaching does is it enables that thinking, that processing, which in our busy lives we just don't allow ourselves the space to do. And it is an incredible coaching conversation style which really does take you from knowing to doing, because a lot of things we know, what's your activation, how do you get to that place that you want to do? And I absolutely love it. It's probably the most transformative thing that I do in my life with other people. It's incredibly powerful, and like you, if you've been on the receiving end and on the giving end, it's incredible actually. So thank you. I think those were 3 incredibly powerful tips which are pretty easy to put into practice. I think we don't want to make life more complex than it is, do we? So actually all of us can find our favorite notebook and our best pen and get journaling tonight. I think we can all do that. So amazing. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we better draw it to an end, because I think we could keep talking for much longer. So I guess that just leaves me to say thank you. How can people find you if they do want to get more information or follow you? Where should they do that?
So at the moment I have a Instagram public profile, so you can find me at marvelous.medic on Instagram for now.
Okay, perfect. Marvelous.medic. Really like that. Yeah, that'll be great. So thank you so much, Susanna. Really lovely conversation. You've given me a lot to think about as well today, which just leaves me to say really, you're welcome. Wish you a happy, healthy day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye then.
Thanks for joining us on the Lifestyle First podcast, making self-care as easy as 1, 2, 3. Don't forget to subscribe and share, and we'd love it if you'd be kind enough to leave a review. To learn more or to arrange a consultation, please visit www.dralkapatel.com. See you next time.